Are you ready?
Yeah.
Alright. This is Allison Kasparek, and I'm doing my interview with Dean Clausen. Dean, what branch of the military were you in?
Well, I was in the Army part of the military. And you want me to keep going or anything?
You can if you want. You can expand.
Okay. I joined up the military when I was in high school. I lived in Grand Island, and that was during the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
And when you were in the military, you got $1 for every drill, every time you had a meeting. So, being very poor at the time, the fact is we lost our farm due to Mother Nature of first a good crop and then came a hailstorm and ruined that. Then later on, a couple of years later, came the drought. We ended up with practically nothing. So that's why I joined the National Guard with parental consent. I was, I think, 16 years old then. I had a lot of friends that were in the National Guard, so it was easy to join in.
Mm-hmm.
It was a machine gun unit. At that time, they called it as unit. They have changed since then. But mainly we fired machine guns. So I was with that unit in Grand Island until I graduated from high school. I graduated, came down to Lincoln to go to school, so naturally I had to drop out. So I had 25 months of military when I came to Lincoln. Come to Lincoln, go to university, met a friend. He was in the National Guard. So it didn't take long for him to convince me I should join. It was a medical unit. So I joined that. Fortunately, along with that, I was taking courses in university, would be first aid, because I wanted to be a coach. So when they had an examination for somebody dropping out for some reason or other, they would give an exam. Not that I was the smartest, but I was the luckiest. Some of the questions were the same thing that we had in university on first aid and as such. So I got one of the top grades each time. So I worked myself up from a private up till a first sergeant. But that took about 3 or 4 years to do that. When I want to get some notes to brush myself up here.
All right.
When I was in the National Guard and also going to university, and I was joined the one here in Lincoln in 1937, but in 1939 it looked like we were going to have a war or something, prepare ourselves for it. They mobilized us. In other words, they put us, we became active military. And we moved to Fort Robinson, Arkansas for a post down there. And that would be in probably 1939. Everything went pretty well down there. had our usual training and so forth. But on well, back in 1941, we had some maneuvers that we did as our regular training. And in 1941, June 9th, while we were on the maneuvers and so forth, which lasted about 3 months, we were moving here and there in the South, I called I guess I didn't call, I wrote my wife and told her to come down and we'd get married. So we set a date, so she came to Little Rock, well, where did she go? Well, we were in Tullahoma, Tennessee. We came down, so we got off from duty about 5 o'clock. Told my wife to find a minister and we'd get married. So some way or other, she found a man, and we called him Uncle John. He had made arrangements for us to come to his house that evening, and he would marry us. So I went there and met Ruth, my wife, there. And we had the ceremony in his yard. When we first got there, he was out in the garden hoeing his tomatoes or whatever. So he said, "Oh, I gotta go dress up and change my uniform." So he went in and dressed up, went through the marriage procedure. Part of it is, we'll honor and obey. And it came to that part, my wife says, "I will not say that." I said, so he asked me if it was okay, and I said, "Yeah, that's okay. I don't expect her to honor and obey me." So anyway, finally finished the ceremony. He says, "You're supposed to have 2 witnesses." Well, he had told me that he had 2 nieces. It'd be all right if they were the witness. So they were. After the ceremony, one of the girls was crying. I said, "Honey, what are you crying about?" She said, "Well, this is the first wedding I've been to." I says, "Yeah, this is the first time I've ever been married too." So that's kind of a sidelight of what happened, but that's what it happens in the military. Well, on December 7th, as we all remember, Pearl Harbor. Ruth, my wife, and I were in a movie watching the show Tom Sawyer. In the middle of the movie, it stopped. Manager came out, says, "All paper boys report to their post." A bunch of kids got up and left. Then when movie was over, we went out, go home, and paper boys were hollering, "Pearl Harbor bombed, Pearl Harbor bombed." They was trying to sell their papers. So my job then was to round up all the guys that were around town. Some of them lived in town with permission. And then, of course, it was on a Sunday. They were at a bar or whatever. Anyway, they were scattered here and there. I got them all rounded up. For a week straight after that, we started packing our units, materials, to put on a train. After a week, train was all set. There were several thousand troops, people, on this train. We went to Fort Ord, California. That is along the coast in California. We had no idea what the Japs might do to us, so we were scattered along the coast in order to catch anybody that might be coming in submarines or whatever we expected anyway. So we were there out for about 2 days before Christmas, came back in to our barracks, spent over right after Christmas, spent a couple days in, and went out again, scattered along the coast, and that was New Year's Eve. I was in a truck, the back of a truck it had been raining. I found this truck that was cold, but it was dry. So I got in the truck, was trying to sleep. Man came around calling my name, found me. He says, report to the captain. So did. The captain says, we're going to send you back to our housing. You will pack up tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. You will be on your way to Carlisle, Pennsylvania. You are entered into the Officers Candidate School. So that happened, and I got to the schooling had started on the 1st of January. So it took a week to go across the United States by train to get to Carlisle Barracks. So I was a week late there, getting there. One of the first things they told us was that there would be 200 in our class there, and only 100 would graduate. So it was pretty tough. But things went along pretty good. And while I was at OCS, and things were going smooth, so I asked for my wife to come out. This was in Pennsylvania, so she came, but so we did our normal life of going places on weekends and seeing the large cities around, which is New York and Washington, D.C. and places like that. We got a lot of sightseeing done. 28th of March, I graduated from Officers Candidate School, and I was sent to, let's see, when I graduated, we got our choice of where to go. I chose Omaha, Fort Omaha at that time. We got there, everything was going pretty good. I'd asked for a telephone. We lived in town. Asked for a telephone. It took about a month to get a telephone. First call, got an order, report to the post. I did. They gave me orders then to go to Texas. So went down to, we had 3 days to get there. So we had to move our stuff back to Lincoln from Omaha. And was there in Texas for about a couple of weeks. Then they moved us across to Charleston, South Carolina. But we were on a train. We're a whole group of probably several thousand people. Going across Georgia, they had a rise going to this little town. The dirt was built up so it was higher than the regular road. Here came a truck loaded with telephone poles. passenger asked for the driver to stop, but he didn't stop. The train hit the cab midsection, took those telephone poles, scattered them just like a bunch of pencils thrown against the wall, tumbling all over. The rider, the person riding along, had jumped. He had slid down the bank, didn't get a scratch on him or anything. It took about a half mile for the train to get stopped. Got to the driver, and his arm was pinned into the door, so they had to get him out. Well, he was already dead at the time. So the doctor that was on the train, and I was in his group, asked me to hold him up so he could sever that arm. So he takes a pocket knife out. My first experience of surgery, I guess, and severed the arm, and so then we went on to Charleston, South Carolina. Was there for about a week or so, and we got on the ships. There was a convoy of probably 15 to 20 ships leaving one morning out of Charleston. We get out a couple of days. We get an order that somebody was sending Morse code to one of the other ships. So they didn't know they was off of our ship. So what they did, they chose about 7 guys, and I was one of them. We would go along, we posted certain places along the ship, in the dark, not move or anything, wait until someone saw somebody, and then capture him. So about an hour went along. Finally we got the notice that they found out where the Morse code was coming from. Well, you know what Morse code is, a dot to dot dot. Mm-hmm. You can do it by, anyway, just like that, or, of course, by flashing dots and dashes. They had caught the person. What had happened, it was one little rivet hole, about the size of your thumb, in the captain's office. Now, after dark, of course, the captain had to have a light. That was the only light on the ship. But what happened, as the ship went along, it was bouncing like this, not evenly. It would, down and up and down and so forth. Well, as that did that threw the Morse code signs out, but nobody could decipher it because it wasn't anything. So that was kind of an unusual experience of finding out that catching the guy who said the Morse code that came out of the captain's office. Well, on that trip, we went to we stopped off at Africa. We went around to South Africa, and we were on that ship 59 days, not knowing where we were going or anything. It was, back in those days, it was need-to-know basis. If you didn't need to know it, you weren't told it either. Mm-hmm. So secrecy then was a lot different than what it is now. Now then, it seems like the media gets all the information before the regular people do. So 59 days from Charleston, South Carolina. The name of the ship happened to be the Mariposa. It was a luxury liner when it was used. Prior to that, it was made into a troop ship. We landed in Karachi, India, which actually is Pakistan. And now the name has been changed. I don't remember exactly the name. We were there for a couple of weeks. Nobody, of course, had been paid because we didn't have any payroll, didn't have any place to spend it anyway. So they was going to pay everybody. We were out along the desert there, about 10 miles out from the main city of Karachi. I was selected. I was a young second lieutenant who just graduated. They sent me in to Karachi to pick up the payroll. Now, in India, streets go all directions. So they drew out a map for me and told me not to change anything off that map, stay right on it. So I get in, I had a British truck, and I had a driver, and we pick up the payroll. We're headed back, following the directions. There was a big park that we had to go across. That park, when we got to it, was covered all white. The Indians were having a meeting, and they were, of course, dressed in the regular garbage, yeah. Don't put down garbage. Anyway, there was all Indians there, and Gandhi was the leader at that time. Their motto was "Quit India." In other words, the Indians wanted to get on their own government and not be under the British rule. And Gandhi was giving a speech there at that time. That's what I didn't know what to do. Driver says, should we shoot our way? I said, we have 45 rounds of ammunition. We'll kill a few people, but all these people will gang on us. They'll tear us apart. They'll torture us. They'll do everything. They'll break us up. No way. So a couple little Indian boys there, they had a little patch that says "Quit India." It was made out of muslin or something like that, real cheap. So I said to this kid, "Baksheesh." Baksheesh is the first word you learn in Indian language. That means give me. They have beggars out. Baksheesh, baksheesh. Next thing you learn, of course, is rupees. That's money, of course. And so I said, baksheesh, rupee, jildi jao. I don't know why I put the jildi in. Jildi means hurry. Jao means go. So I got two kids about junior age. One of them had one of these little patches. I said, rupee, I gave him, so I pinned it on my shirt. These two kids get in front of us. They would talk and push and stuff. They would move a foot to 2 foot, space about this far. They'd move the truck up, inch by inch. It took us over a half hour to go the 1 block through that park that was there. So I was relieved. The fact is, had the payroll. Had I lost that payroll, I'd be court-martialed. That would be whatever. It wouldn't be good, you know. So, can you take a break? Yeah. I gotta take a cough drop here. Well, I was assigned, of course, ready again?
Yeah.
I was assigned in the Army, to hospital units or anything related to medics. So, after we left Karachi, there were 5 medical units, groups, and they dispersed us throughout the east part there. One went to Kunming, that's where I went. I don't know where all they went. Kunming, and there's several other places in China that we were sent. And while I spent a year or so in New Delhi. Beautiful city. It's like a big city split. One part of it is same as it is here in Lincoln. It's what we call modern. The other, just like a railroad track down through the center of it. One side was up to date, the other one's the older section of the city. That's like two different worlds when you walk from one to the other. Well then, from New Delhi, I was sent to Kunming, China. And I got there, and I told the one of the friends of mine, who's an officer, I says, the our commander didn't like me, so he's shanghaiing me. That meant that he was kicking me out. He said, no, he had nothing to do with it. He says, I requested you. I said, you requested me? He says, yeah. He says, I think this would be a different experience for you and a chance maybe for you to get a promotion. I said, well, whatever. So they assigned me as a supply officer in Kunming for all the medical supplies that came over what we called the hump. That was Burma. Now India is like 3 places. One is India, one is Burma, one is China. Just in that order. Burma and China, we could not do anything because the Japanese had all of that territory. We had people in Burma trying to get the Japanese out of it. The Japs thought if they took Burma, they could separate us from the rest of China. So anyway, where am I here on this? Well, being the supply officer in China when I first got there, one reason they needed a replacement was because the fellow that was in command of the supply depot got dysentery, mainly because you get it from drinking Jingbao juice. Kind of confusing. Jingbao means hair raid. The juice is this liquid. It's a rice wine plus 100 plus 100 and some. Really potent. And if you get, of course you drink that, weakens your inside. Then in China, one of the first things you learn to say is Jini Ge Wo Lun Kai Shui, meaning, well, as I was saying, in China, I was assigned to be the medical supply officer. And the colonel, when I first got there, was telling me my orders, give me orders on what to do. He said that I would pick up all medical supplies marked the United States on it that came in. I'd pick them up at the airfield or any place I could find them. Now, at that time, we had the communists and the nationalists, and we had the Chinese, and we had American forces. Now, the two different sections there, the nationalists and communists, were stealing anything they could get to build up. They were going to have a war as soon as the United States got out of there, which did happen, of course. So anyway, I was told to do that. I've been there for about 2 or 3 weeks. Colonel came out and says, we're going to give you an inspection of your business here. I says, Colonel, you may as well give me 0 and chew me out, because I cannot pass any inspection. But if you give me 1 month, I'll pass an inspection 100%. I said, nothing, I'm not prepared for it, and this, I cannot do it. But give me the month. So I said, okay. So during that time, find out the Chinese, we were in, our buildings were made out of mud bricks. And it rained a lot. On a bad night, when it was raining hard, the Chinese could chip a hole that big and crawl through it because they're smaller. If you can get your shoulders through, you can get the rest of your body through. Now they would chip on a bad night, of course. We would have 2 guards out. We would have them inside the building. But they never could catch the Chinese was watching, and they would be able to work that out. And they were stealing out of our warehouse. The way they knew that, because the Chinese, we worked the Chinese, what we call coolies. We did the work for us, the heavy lifting and so forth. They knew what were in the boxes. There's all medicine. Sulfa drugs were big at that time. So they would try to steal the sulfa drugs and, of course, sell them on the street or where else. So finally, in order to stop that, I had friends at the airport, air base, and they would get a bunch of lumber in that'd be maybe 8 inches to 1 foot wide, about 8 foot long. I'd ask them for that lumber, and they'd give it to us. To take those boards and nail them together so it's upright, like those curtains over there, and then take a row of boxes to hold it. You couldn't nail into that mud, it would just no good. Take those boxes and line them up 1, 2, 3, and in between that you would have this boards that I wide enough to walk through it and carry a box. Got that done, and so there wasn't any more stealing. Then I'd open these boxes and see what was in it, and on the outside of the box I would write the number of units and so forth. So I had an inventory there, and I had the inventory on my paperwork. Took me about a month to do all that, get it in good shape. Told the colonel that I was ready, so he inspected our units. There was our medical group, quartermaster that handles certain supplies, signal, handles signal supplies, ordnance and so forth, about 5 or 6 different groups. Inspected all of us. I get a superior rating. Rest of them got inferior. I wasn't very popular. Now then, you gotta repay people for what they do. So, in town, in the city, there was a good bakery that made delicious rolls and stuff, cookies. Our men, everybody liked to go through the city to buy the cookies, the rolls. So a couple men would like, they wanted those cookies. The only way we get it was, of course, go to town and get them. It was illegal for us to go in. So I'd tell them, okay, 2 guys could go, and drive in, pick up the cookies and stuff, and we could get coffee. So we'd have cookies and coffee about 10 o'clock every day on a break. So that worked out real good. Also, these men, if they got caught, they should come straight back to our work detail and tell me everything that happened. So some of the men in the other units were getting to do that. So what happened, they complained that the colonel got a hold of me and was going to chew me out a little bit. I told him, I said, well, these men have worked hard, and we get our work done better than anybody else, and they have to be compensated. He said, well, I understand your position, but you just can't let it happen. I said, okay then. But along with getting these supplies, I had an interpreter, Chinese interpreter, and although I'd learned a little bit, I couldn't, a whole lot of Chinese words that I didn't have any idea. So one time, our interpreter had told me, he drew me a map of a compound, a place that the Chinese had under control. I mean, it's where it was part of their military. Drew me a map and I went out there. They had a compound is buildings, then with a wall around it. So I got to this place. On the entrance, a guard on each side and a machine gun on each side. I get in, I went to their little office and asked if I could see what was in their buildings. They said, no way. So I take a hammer, this driver and I, we take a hammer, knock the lock off. We load it up. It was muslin, great big bales of muslin, about so big around, about 30-some inches tall. Mm-hmm. Weighed a couple 100 pounds, I guess. I don't know. It was heavy. Took 2 of us to lift the thing to put it in the truck. We got pretty good load on the truck. Got ready to leave. Here at the gate, guards on each side looking at me, guns pointed, and a machine gun, same way. Driver again says, should we make a run for it? I said, we'd get mowed down before we got halfway. So I went into the office there to the Chinaman. I could speak a little Chinese. He could speak a little English, but he asked me to sign this piece of paper. So I thought, okay, I signed it. John Doe. He let me through. The next day, here came the colonel. He said, asked me what I did. I told him. He says, well, do you realize that you could have been shot? I said, yes, I realize that. I said, I guess I'm pretty lucky. He said, well, you're going beyond the call of duty. I said, well, sir, you remember what you told me? Pick up all supplies. I'm doing that. So anyway, that was canceled out. Well, I went over there in 1942.
Mm-hmm.
And in 1944, I was able to be sent back to the United States. Came back on the ship, boat. Took 31 days. And we went from Calcutta, we flew down to Calcutta, then around Australia, stopped in Australia, and finally back to Los Angeles. I'd been gone. It took about 31 days to get back, but I'd been gone for over 32 months gone. Now, while I was gone, of course, before I left, my wife died. She wanted a child, because she said, you may not come back or something. I said, yeah, I know. So we got the proper prescription. We got ready for a child. Giggling over there. Well, anyway, when I got back, I'd been gone 2.5 years. When I first saw my child, he was 2 years and a month old before I ever saw him.
Jeez.
Before I ever knew that I had a child, a neighbor lady wrote me a nice letter telling me how cute he was and all that stuff that they tell about little babies, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I had not heard from my wife. I heard from the neighbor's letter. Our mail was bad. 2 weeks after I got a letter from this neighbor lady writing me, I get one from my wife. But we would get mail, it would be censored, and I helped do censoring at times too. If you took a piece of paper and start cutting it like that, you'd have all these little fringes down there. They'd cut out a chunk here and a chunk here and all that. That's one reason never got any mail. Another one is that a lot of times an airplane gets shot down, that we were carrying the mail, that get burned up.
Mm-hmm.
So mail was not very regular. So anyway, I get back. I left in December. I get back in January,
Mm-hmm.
which is, 31 days, so a month in between there.
Mm-hmm.
After I get back, I was landed in I landed in Los Angeles when I came back. Then I was sent to Camp Bowie, Texas. It was a large hospital unit. And when I was there, colonel called me in. He says, we are having complaints from our enlisted men that they're not getting enough food. They're not getting any meat to speak of. He says, I'm going to assign you as mess officer and see what you can do about it. I said, sir, I would like to have 1 month to figure it out. So I'd been there a week or so. The neighbor lady lived 2 or 3 blocks from us, beautiful gal. She married to the major that was the regular mess officer. So I find out enlisted men, they were not getting any meat, and that was kind of unusual. So I take my car when my wife, this gal wouldn't make friends with my wife, be nice to her.
Mm-hmm.
I said, honey, I can't, you don't do that. I don't want you to speak to her. I don't want you, just stay away from everything. You have to. I won't tell you why. So anyway, I take my car, a set of binoculars. I go back about a block or so, park it away from the end of the building. About 11:30, here comes a car. It backs up. Here comes a guy. They loaded 13 hams, big hams, in the back of in the trunk. That's about all they could get in there, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So I go to the gate, main gate, and tell them, I said, I want you to search this particular car. I got the license number. I said, search that car and report your findings to my commanding officer. So of course, I got out of there. They got to the gate, MP searched the car and found all those hams.
Mm-hmm.
So that was it. So anyway, that was one thing. I was always kind of a person that find bad things that go on. Along with that, that was a 2,000 bed hospital.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big place. These were scattered out, you know. We had several hundred German POWs. And this one POW was big. He was the main cook. He was the cook in charge of the cooking. And he was complaining one time that they were not getting sufficient food.
Mm-hmm.
So I made a colonel call me in. I said, well, let's have a meeting. The 3 of us, the big German, myself, and the colonel. So I come to the meeting. I said to the German man, I said, do you know what the Geneva Convention is? He said, yes. I said, do you believe in the Geneva Convention? He said, yes. Well, now, the Geneva Convention tells how many calories a day that each person should have. And of course, a lot of others, codes of behavior of all that. So I said to the German POW, I said, now then, how many calories are you getting a day? Well, he didn't know. I said, well, you're getting so-and-so. Now then, Geneva Convention says that's, I said, we'll cut you down to the Geneva Convention. That means that we're doing everything okay, but you're getting, right now, twice the food, twice the calories that is required.
Mm-hmm.
I said, now if you don't like it, I could also make arrangements. My arrangements will be that we will trade you for whatever or nobody, send you back to Germany, so you won't be a POW anymore. No. His life was here better than going out there fighting. That's what he'd be doing if he went back, of course.
Right.
So they was having an easy life here, and just spoiled them for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So then from there, I finally ended up hospital unit. I went to Camp Swift, that was down in Texas. That was after the war, of course, and they were getting rid of, reshuffling the equipment, the furniture and so forth in a barracks. Mm-hmm. And so they sent me there, and I was in charge of getting that loaded up. One day we might load on just chairs alone, hundreds of them, on a train and so forth. Mm-hmm. Then from there I went to Omaha, and from there I went on to well, I finally got out of the military as such. I had 7 years there. Mm-hmm. And then I joined, well, I was in the reserves, which of course is standby. Mm-hmm. So I taught school at Lincoln High School during that time. Mm-hmm. And I get orders again to report for active duty. Now, I don't know whether you know about the Cuban crisis. Yep. And I was at what we call the 162nd Medical Battalion. Mm-hmm. I had worked myself up to a lieutenant colonel at that time, one step at a time. Mm-hmm. I was sent to Fort Riley, Kansas with my unit. And then to make up a battalion as such, first you have your company and then you have your battalion. To make up the battalion, they had 4 other units that came in. One from South Dakota, one from St. Louis, no, not St. Louis, but where the arch is. 4 different units that came. And we trained helicopter evacuation mainly. And we would be, our exercises, we'd scatter people out and put band-aids on them, this and that, as a medical unit to pick them up and take them to a hospital and so forth. So actually was involved as everything, hospital on down. Mm-hmm. So we were trained doing that. Then Cuba had about 6 submarines around their island, and for each submarine that they had, the United States also had a submarine, kind of checking each other. Mm-hmm. Cuba and Russia, their leaders, would not sign the agreement for United States put out. The deadline for signing that was in October 28th, I think it was. Forget the dates, but anyway, the deadline was on this October deal. Mm-hmm. Had they not signed then, we would be at war. Now, our training led us to, we knowing, had they not signed, that at 4:30 at that night, that morning it would be, my unit, battalion, would go to the air base and they would fly us to I don't know where, mm-hmm. because first they had to have a place to land in Cuba. Right. In other words, that gave the infantry time to establish a landing place. Mm-hmm. I was nervous, of course, and I was sitting by the phone waiting midnight to come to see what happens. Mm-hmm. 12:30 came, I get the phone call. He says, "This is Adjutant so-and-so. Mission abolished, back to routine." I said, "Sir, would you tell me that in a different language. He says, yes, our previous planned mission has been canceled. We will now go back to our routine training.
Mm-hmm.
So we did. So then, of course, after that, a few months later, our units that were down in Fort Riley, of course, we came back. We were back to our reserve status as such.
Mm-hmm.
Along with that, shortly after that, I guess I got out. I was in the military about 23 years or better.
Mm-hmm.
Now then, I've tried to cover about odds and ends of a lot of stuff there.
No, that's perfect.
What questions do you have or anything?
You answered basically everything I was going to ask you. It was really thorough. Thank you.
That's good. Now then, I go to Lux Junior High School here
Mm-hmm.
a couple days before they will have a program, veteran program.
Mm-hmm.
They invite about 50 veterans by letter, if they'll come and sign, you know. This lady sets up a real nice program, regular program. When you go in, they have the band will be playing for you.
Mm-hmm.
And as the kids come in, they're still playing and everybody gets seated. They'll put those veterans up on the stage there, chairs along there, 50 of them.
Mm-hmm.
They also sign 50 rooms. And we'll have kids that come in to those rooms. You will talk to them 20 minutes, and then they got 5 minutes to shift.
Mm-hmm.
We have 5 different groupings that they will have. Talk about whatever you want to, or the kids will ask questions. I always like it when they ask questions. It makes it easier for me to answer to it.
Mm-hmm.
But after that, they're invited to eat dinner there,
Mm-hmm.
and the kids will be your host and so forth. Then about a week or two later, you get a bunch of letters, little letters from the office, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe about 10 or 12 letters telling what they like, and it's thank you letters, what they are.
All right.
I had 3 of them that thought that me talking about Gandhi was most interesting. If I'm kind of wound down on it, if you got something else to ask me,
I think that's good. Thank you for letting me interview you.
well, now that I'm going to show you something.
All right.
Oh boy.